Where are you?
I am between Redmond and Bend, Oregon as we speak.
Oh, nice. Great. Great. I hope you've pulled over, Dave.
I am sitting in the back getting car sick right now.
Oh my gosh, the car is in motion. Wow,
it is in motion.
You have a forgiving family.
I have a chauffeur for this particular meeting.
Excellent. You have kids in the car?
Yes, I do.
Oh my goodness.
They are not driving.
They're being kind to you.
I will go on mute.
Well, I appreciate commissioners joining us on a week off. I'm grateful for that. We'll get started. I'm John Engen, Mayor of the City of Missoula. With me today are Commissioners Dave Strohmeyer, Juanita Vero, and Josh Slotnick, along with Adrian Beck, our Director of Emergency Operations. And the discussion today is around what we call Operation Shelter. As folks attending may recall, the commissioners and I announced some time ago that we wanted to be organized and intentional about ensuring that folks who were camping in the urban wild illegally had opportunities to camp safely and have sanitary conditions and services. And we discussed a lot of the reasons for that at that time. I won't belabor that. The report we're receiving today from Ms. Beck is new to all of us. So we're hearing it in real time with all of the attendees, of whom there are about 39 this afternoon. Order of business is that Ms. Beck will give the report. Commissioners and I may ask some questions based on that. Then we will open it up for questions and comments from the audience. I'd ask that everyone hold their questions until we're through with the presentation. We're scheduled for 90 minutes, which means I would hope that we could keep remarks to about 3 minutes apiece. There will be additional opportunity for public comment. Commissioners and I won't be making any decisions today. We'll be looking for feedback from the community, and of course we'll need to discuss among ourselves what we believe the best course of action is based on the opportunities that are presented to us today. If you would like to comment at any point, including during this meeting and thereafter, there's a public email that is available, and that is solutions@missoulacounty.org. Again, that's solutions@missoulacounty.org. And we will review all of those comments as we proceed. Commissioners and I have not set a timeline for making a decision, nor have we solidified any notions as of yet. So with that, Ms. Beck, we would love to see your presentation. I'd also like to thank Adrian and her team. For those of you who don't know Adrian, she is always willing to step up to solve hard problems, and was an incredible leader in our pandemic response. She is also the person who takes care of floods and fires and all of the things that that none of the rest of us really want to take care of or deal with. And she does that with grace and skill and effectiveness. So thank you, Adrian, for stepping up once again to assist us in trying to solve this challenging community problem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the opportunity to give a presentation on the work of our incident management team over the last 4 weeks or so. I think it bears repeating that an incident management team is about objectives-based management. And so when we have these complex problems, it's a way for us to organize our planning cycles and check into our objectives to try to come up with the solutions that are necessary. And so I have a short kind of slide deck that we'll go through today to really talk about overview of team findings, the process that we used, and ultimately some recommendations to move forward. So bear with me while I try to navigate the technology here and share my screen. Okay, can you guys all see that?
We can.
Very good. Okay, so Operation Shelter or Operation Safe Shelter is kind of the name that we have adopted for this mission. And as I mentioned before, when we talk about incident management, it's all about objectives. And so that's kind of where we'll start. Our primary objectives for this mission were to identify suitable locations that can accommodate unhoused people with a range of needs in temporary shelters, tents, or vehicles. Engage service providers and other subject matter experts to verify location suitability to better inform viable options. And that when we bring sites forward as options, that there is the ability and or a basic plan to meet sanitation, security, and access to services. So our approach, first and foremost, and I apologize, I know these slides are pretty small and they're not really intended for reading necessarily, but our first task was to try to assess the current situation and identify any contributing factors that that were causing the current and increase in unhoused and unsheltered individuals in and around Missoula that were camping illegally because they didn't have other options. And so first and foremost, I think there's two factors that are probably relatively obvious. One is that our current homeless shelters are operating at a 50% capacity due to continued Centers for Disease Control guidance for COVID mitigation. So social distancing still applies, still is the best practice. This is not unique to Missoula. This is nationwide. Shelters are adhering to this guidance. And right now there is no current timeline as to when that guidance might change. So that in and of itself cuts down the amount of capacity that we have in our traditional shelter models by 50%, which is pretty significant. And then the last one is obvious to everyone in that we have a housing crisis here in Missoula. And we have several individuals who have housing vouchers, are connected to case management, but there's no housing for them to go into right now, which further exacerbates the number of folks that are unsheltered. Our second task was to create criteria to evaluate potential sites so that we really could try to understand what we were looking at and to the greatest extent possible, comparing apples to apples. And so hopefully this will show up on your screen. Do you see it? The criteria and aggregate scoring methodology?
We cannot at the moment.
All right,
Looks like the computer is attempting to load it.
Very good. Let's try. Is it up now?
It is. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for being my eyes on that. I can't see what you see. So we came up with this criteria to essentially look at every site that we identified and give it a score. And the score is not as important as really trying to be intentional about how we were looking at that, and then we could have a comparative value. And so size, obviously, we needed something bigger than a postage stamp, but not necessarily as large as a football field. Utilities, the proximity to utilities, including not just power, but water, sewer, and or the ability for septic. Transportation, being near existing public transportation, having access to sidewalks, crosswalks, those kinds of things. Proximities, what is it close to? The growth category should be considered in, is this a short-term immediate pop-up situation, or is this something that could be realized for a longer-term solution? Security, as far as how secure is the site? Does it need fencing? So security is a twofold thing, security for the occupants that would be at the site, but also security for the adjacent neighborhoods. And then what type of facilities would be suitable at that location? Is it suitable just for tents, for wall tents, vehicles, permanent structures, semi-permanent structures, etc.? What is it close to? Is it close to main roadways? Is it close to schools, other things that maybe we want to be considerate of? And then access. And when I think about access, I think about how easy is it to navigate to? so that when we think about situations, if we're really trying to address illegal camping in the urban wild, I think as Commissioner Slotnick likes to call it, we need to be intentional about, is it easy to find, so that when someone is encountered in a situation where they shouldn't be, in an unsafe situation without appropriate resources, a conversation can occur such that, well, you can't be here, but you can go to this other location, and this other location, wherever it is, needs to be easy to find and able to navigate to. But it also needs to be accessible to emergency services for fire, ambulance, and law enforcement. All right. So we're back here. Are we back to the slide deck?
We are.
Thank you. So went through and kind of created that scoring criteria. And then our third task was to engage with city and county staff to further inform site suitability and function. So when we talk about zoning regulations, talk about environmental health issues, floodplain, those are the types of things that we were discussing with city staff. But then also, as we're looking at parcels that may be under city or county ownership, really wanting to check in with chief administrative staff for both the city and the county to understand any long range or short range planning that each of those agencies may have for those particular parcels. So it all starts with a map, essentially. We were able to work, and very fortunate to work with City GIS to take a lot of our scoring criteria and represent it in a visual platform on a map, which then allowed us to kind of quickly hone in on areas that were better suited than others. We were able to assess 21 sites, a combination of private properties, city or county owned parcels. I will say that the private properties, based on the objectives that we had and the fact that our team was not vested with any kind of decision-making authority, it made it very challenging to really assess private properties, because we were not in a position to be negotiating sale prices, lease agreements, or those kinds of things. And then additionally, some properties, most of the properties that we looked at were either for sale or recently for sale, but there were some properties that they just look really good, but they weren't necessarily for sale. So cold calling presents some challenges there, and making assumptions that we would be able to use those sites for this purpose was a challenge. So city and county owned parcels kind of rose to the top for those various reasons. But we were able to then use the scoring criteria, check in with technical specialists and experts within city and county government, as well as check in with our service providers who have an intimate knowledge of this population and what is or isn't feasible, what is or isn't important, and then begin to further refine and hone in what we were looking at. So key findings are that, and this should probably come as no surprise to anyone, is that there is no single site that is suited to address the needs of the current or expected unsheltered population. And what we think, in consultation with our local subject matter experts and in looking across the landscape of our country as the many communities are dealing with this, that we really need to look at options on a continuum and really look to deploy 3 different locations that have a different look and feel to them. And so we started to look at a site or sites that could offer temporary transitional housing for individuals who either have a current housing voucher or are connected to housing navigation services, but can't be placed because there's no place for them to go right now. Or those individuals that unexpectedly become homeless for a very short period of time while they kind of figure things out. In this situation, individuals would be accepted into this type of site through the existing referral criteria and case management that is kind of operating within our jurisdiction today. Additionally, we feel that there's a need for a site that can act as a legal, minimally supported, safe campground. And this site should be easy to find, back to kind of that, its ability to navigate to, and easily supported with sanitation services such as garbage and bathroom facilities. Outreach to individuals as far as how services would be provided would be very similar to what we see today with individuals staying in encampments. So utilization of the homeless outreach team and others that are accustomed to meeting people where they are, either in encampments or hopefully at this legally supported campground. And then finally, taking on some of the successes that we've seen with the temporary safe outdoor space out at Buckhouse Bridge, we feel it is important for a site to be developed that can support a service-rich environment comprised of small, all-season, hard-sided structures. This site would require 24/7 operational management, and individuals would be accepted into this site based on a referral criteria. Some of the challenges that I think we've seen with the temporary safe outdoor space, while they've done remarkable work and we're able to stand that up in a very short period of time, the area that they're located in is a challenge, and having people in tents for 365 days out of the year is likely not realistic in our environment. So, our 2 recommendations. So based on our criteria, to address the current limited capacity of local homeless shelters and lack of available housing, our recommendation is to utilize the city-owned facility at 1427 West Broadway, which is the former Sleepy Inn, for temporary transitional housing. This site would be a hybrid site in that it has been most recently used for COVID response to provide isolation and quarantine rooms for individuals who had no suitable location to do so, which in almost all cases has been out of our homeless population. In consultation with the health officer and the operations folks within the incident command team within the health department, as well as with the POV, there continues to be a need for isolation of individuals, not nearly on the scale that we've seen for the last 12 months, but they do occur and they do need a place to go. And so they don't require the entire facility, but they do require a portion of the facility. And so the recommendation would be that a portion of the rooms at the Sleepy Inn be held in reserve for isolation purposes to ensure that the Poverello Center can continue operations and that we can continue to protect the community from communicable disease, but that the rest of the facility could be realized as this temporary transitional housing. Advantages to this site is that it could be up and operational in a very limited amount of time, probably within a couple of weeks. And costs may be reimbursable through existing emergency solutions grant currently managed by the Human Resource Council, because it would be ticking a lot of the boxes within their grant eligibility. A recommendation for a legal safe campground. To address those experiencing homelessness who need a minimally supported safe option to illegal camping, construct and design a camping area with sanitation services, security, and designated camping spots at the city-owned parcel at the end of Clark Fork Lane. So for those who don't know where that is, hopefully this will pop up for you. If someone can tell me if that came up.
It's there, Adrian. Thank you.
Okay, so to navigate folks a little bit, this is Reserve Street here. This is the Super Walmart at this location, a couple of gas stations. The Clark Fork Lane parcel that we are talking about is the one in green here, just for purposes of orientation, and we'll get into this towards the end of the presentation. Red parcels here are ones that we did evaluate, but for various reasons, we took them off of the recommendation list. For example, this parcel down here, it is a little obvious to see that a majority of that parcel is actually in the floodplain. The current Reserve Street encampment is in this general area under the bridge. So it's very close to that current location. It's close to services. It would be easy to navigate to, and bus transit is in pretty short distance. And then the final recommendation for a safe outdoor space to provide all seasons safe environment for individuals experiencing homelessness who are ready to access services geared toward placement into permanent housing. Construct and design a hard-sided outdoor space with individual shelters designated for single or double occupancy with separate shared bathroom and shower facilities at the city-owned lots near the cemetery off of North Russell. It should also be noted that another site that I think is very good for this location, just not today because of the construction that is currently occurring there, is what we're calling the site behind Trinity. It's a county-owned parcel just outside of the detention center off of West Broadway. So we'll pull those up here. Did it come up?
It did.
Okay, so we're looking at the green area there, not the entire green area, but any portion of this area is currently not being utilized for cemetery purposes. It is flat. It has access to water. There is sewer nearby, but in consultation with the Health Department and Environmental Health, this particular site would probably in most likelihood be eligible to obtain septic because the sewer is a significant distance away, but that is something that would need to be considered as to which option made the most sense. The advantage here is that while it is a little bit farther removed, the navigability of this site is less important because it will be on a referral basis. Transportation would likely be arranged for the occupants that are there, but there also is public transportation relatively close by. Additionally, I don't think that anybody has in the back of their mind that these are going to be forever sites or forever situations. The benefit of creating a hard-sided in temporary type structures that can withstand our temperatures in the winter and summer is that it can be packed up and moved away. And at some point, then the infrastructure would be at this site for a future park or other public amenity. The Trinity site, just to orient folks to that, which likely within the next 12 to 18 months would be suitable to begin looking at this site for similar development. Advantage here, of course, is its proximity to the eventual Trinity facility, but it too has very good access to water and sewer, is on a main thoroughfare with good access to public transportation and in near proximity to many essential services. So I think I mentioned it before, but when we're talking about these safe outdoor spaces, you can think of them as a tiny village, if you will. Many communities this is the solution that they are trying to implement within their community. In some of our research, I think why we have presented recommendations on a continuum is that while this may be a safe outdoor space may be the best option, it likely will not meet the needs of everyone experiencing homelessness or our unsheltered community. And that providing that continuum of options allows for kind of this graduated system as we work towards getting everyone into permanent housing. So just real quickly, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this unless there's questions. I'm happy to answer them, but just to show kind of what we did look at and potentially why we are not currently looking at it or recommending it to go further. So starting in the kind of the western section of the urban core, we're out here by the airport. There is a county-owned parcel here that is in the development park. It is just a bare piece of land, as well as the Lalonde Ranch out here, also under county ownership. These sites were discounted primarily because of proximity to services. If we were looking at these sites for a legal sanctioned camping area, while it may seem to make sense to put that as far out of the city as possible, it also just poses a tremendous challenge as far as people being able to navigate there, and then once they're being able to be supported or self-supported, because there's just lack of grocery, lack of services, and very intermittent transportation. These hashing marks indicate that it was a private property. So both of these properties were either recently on the market or currently on the market. And I think I already discussed some of the challenges with evaluating those and running them to ground. This parcel here is part of the Glen Eagle and city and county kind of combined ownership here. Suitability here is just not great. While it is a very large tract of land with potentially some options for separate camping areas. Again, with the foot traffic and access for emergency vehicles was challenged with this site. It's very steep terrain. It's a little bit closer to services, but still a significant distance to an actual grocery store. While there's many convenience stores there at the mouth of Grant Creek, there's just not a good option for actual groceries. As we move into the kind of the northern section, we already looked at the area behind the cemetery. Some of these hashed marks are, again, private property. So the sugar beet, as we typically were calling it, is the Edulog commercial property that's here. It's just a big open field next to their headquarters. Again, hard to run to ground on that one. Rankin was a commercially available warehouse that we wanted to look at, but on the day that we went to go take a peek at it, it had already gone under contract. This MRL site here, I think had been kind of put onto our radar by several individuals. It does look like a nice prime piece of ground as far as that there's just nothing there. This is Coal Mine Road going up towards the landfill. But it is as a former mill site and likely has contaminants on the ground that would not be suitable for establishing a campground or any kind of long-term living situation. Similar situation with the 1335 Rogers Street parcel in that it also is a city-owned lot, but has some prior activity on that associated with White Pine Sash. And other activities that would require some remediation before we would be able to realize that as a viable site. And then the Scott Street lots, similar situation there. In consultation with the city, it appears that the front portion of this lot has been remediated to residential standards, and there are current plans for development on that, which then this back portion here is not ready for any kind of development at this point in time. As we move kind of to the central area of town, again, back over here to our Clark Fork Lane parcel, the wastewater treatment plant here. This parcel here that is directly north of the wastewater treatment plant is currently being utilized for wastewater operations, and so it would be a significant undertaking to kind of navigate continuing their operations while also trying to establish the site within their fenced perimeter there. And then the Compost South parcel, as I mentioned, a majority of that is in the floodplain. Access for emergency vehicles would become pretty challenged as well. Moving over to the Champion Triangle, this is another one that was kind of put on our radar. It's private property next to Ram Field. Its proximity to trails and bus service was very attractive, but again, we're in a situation where former industrial use of the property likely would require remediation that would be beyond kind of an appropriate scope. The Orange Street Triangle, as we were calling it, which is really just the parking lot here that's down right off of the Orange Street Bridge. We had this on our consideration list for some time. In consultation with the city, there is some current movement for redevelopment of that, but also a pavement parking lot in downtown really would have to be a very short-term situation. And so that it came off kind of our recommendations list for those reasons. And you'll have to bear with me. We had to kind of split the pictures up to get them both onto one slide here. But as we're looking at the southern sector, another area we looked at was what we're calling the Fort Triangle. Currently, it is a piece of open space ground that is owned by the city of Missoula, sandwiched here between the country club and Larchmont Golf Course. This site, a little challenging to navigate to, and while South Reserve is becoming more and more bustling every day, there still is not as many services in this area of town as we would like to see, which is why it is not one that we're pushing forward for a recommendation. Missoula County Fairgrounds, obviously county-owned parcel with a lot of ground there, and in consultation with county staff, there is a long-range plan for the fairgrounds that any of the areas that we were looking at for potential suitability already really do have a plan that's in place and in motion that would be pretty disruptive. And then finally, on this slide, we did look at a parcel that was commercially for sale. It's the old Social Security building out on the corner of Highway 93 and Blue Mountain Road. For orientation purposes, this is the Peak Health Club. Very large facility, very large lot. It did have, existing well and septic. It checked a lot of boxes, but the biggest one and probably the hardest to overcome is that it is just so far removed from any kind of services, any kind of grocery, and any kind of public transportation. And then finally, kind of to round out to the east, we did have conversations with Missoula County Public Schools facilities folks. The Mount Jumbo School is still vacant at this point in time. That's not being currently leased. And there is quite a bit of adjacent ground outside of the school bounds that is under county parks ownership. This site, again, speaking of kind of just a little far removed, although it does have good transportation, is pretty entrenched in a residential area and is very removed from services. There's no real good grocery in East Missoula, so it would be reliant on the public transportation system. And that is what I have. I'd be happy to entertain any questions, go back to any portion of things that you want to see more of.
Thank you, Adrian. Sorry we disappeared there for a moment. Really appreciate that thoughtful presentation. And you've given us a lot to consider. Commissioners, any questions or reactions at the moment, or should we get to questions and comments?
I just would love to add my thanks, Mayor. Adrian, you guys did a fantastic job. I really appreciated that you described the process to us and that the public too could understand the process and the thoroughness you went through and the different criteria and scoring and all that. I think Dave may have had this idea to give you this assignment, but it was the right way to go. And thank you for all the information you shared.
Absolutely, echoing that. Thanks, Adrian.
And likewise, thanks, Adrian, for bringing the focus and organization that only an incident management team such as the one you ran herd on here could bring to this issue. So thank you, and look forward to hearing from members of the public and the community on the recommendations.
Thank you, commissioners, and thanks again, Adrian. A couple of things to sort of frame the remainder of our time together here today. One is that the commissioners and I, along with the Missoula City Council, will be operating from, I think, a collective understanding that doing nothing is not an option, and that doing nothing will further exacerbate an already really difficult situation, and ultimately cost more than anything we can do that's proactive and intentional. We also recognize that whatever solutions we come to are likely not going to be universally applauded. And we accept that responsibility as elected officials, and are likely to have some difficult decisions to make, but we will do those. We'll make those decisions outside of a vacuum. I believe that it is very important that we move forward as quickly as we possibly can. For purposes of the remainder of our time, we have 53 attendees. This is a Zoom webinar, and if you would like to make a comment or ask a question, you're welcome to do so at this time. If you're participating via Zoom, simply raise your hand and I will recognize you. I do have a timer here, and I'm going to set it for 3 minutes, but that doesn't preclude you from sending lengthier or more thoughtful remarks, again, to that email address at solutions@Missoula County. At this time, we have 2 hands up, and Western Montana DSA.
Hi, Commissioners, Mayor, Adrian. This is Josh Decker. I didn't have the option to rename my account before I started. I'll try and be brief and comprehensive. Thank you for your forward thinking and willingness to address these issues. This is critical stuff that's going to affect our community, and it's going to continue to affect our community in increasing waves as we move towards the future. That brings me to my first question. Adrian, you talked about the predictive capacity of future unhoused neighbors. I'm curious about a little more information about what you use to formulate that kind of predictive number of future unhoused. And I would encourage the city and county, as they consider this, to really take a closer look at the Glen Eagle site again. The proximity of the Glen Eagle site to a grocery store, I would have to look at the map, but the behind the cemetery site, it seems like, is about as far away from a grocery store as the Glen Eagle site. And so it seems like there might be some internal conflict there in terms of the metric that we're using to decide these things. So encourage you to look closer at the Glen Eagle site, if for no other reason, because the development on North Scott Street right now is going to bring, first, let me preface this by saying I want this to happen in my neighborhood. I live on the north side, and I encourage the behind the cemetery site to be used, perhaps in conjunction with the Glen Eagle site. The development of the North Scott sector is slated in the next 2 years to bring 500 new units of housing to our neighborhood. And that's, depending on how many bedrooms that is, that's 1,000 new neighbors, say, in the next 2 years to my neighborhood. And I just encourage us to share the distribution of this type of development throughout the city. The pairing of the behind the cemetery site with 500 brand new units within a stone's throw of each other is high impact. It is also, again, something that I want in my neighborhood, because I believe that my neighborhood is a key piece of community involved in combating these crises proactively. I want to encourage other pieces of the community to take up the mantle of community care additionally to the north side. Again, thank you for your forward thought and concern on this issue. And I'm sure I could come up with other comment that I'll throw in an email to you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. And I'm making note of questions, and I think we'll try to answer those after folks have had a chance to comment, if that works for everyone. Great, thank you. Miranda Peltier. Miranda, it looks like you're muted. Still muted, Miranda, if you can hear us. All right, we're going to come back to you. And Councilwoman Merritt.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me?
We can, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And thanks again. I'll reiterate that. Thanks, Adrian, and your team for this great work. I wonder if Adrian could expand a little bit on the difference between the first group of people that you described and the third group. I'm not sure I'm really clear on the distinction that you're making of who would be taken care of in each of those different kind of criteria that you described.
Great, thank you. And we'll get back to that question as well. Julie, anything else?
Nope, just great job. Thanks.
Thank you. And Andy. Andy?
Hi there. Can you hear me now? Sorry.
We can, thank you.
Thank you. I unfortunately was tied up at the office and missed the presentation, but I wanted to call in and make sure that I know a lot of times folks call in and say that they want to support our unhoused neighbors, and then a whole lot of other things come up, separating some unhoused neighbors from others. But I am here to unequivocally offer my support for this really important project moving forward, to express gratitude for thinking about a variety of ways to address a crisis that has been facing our community for a long time and is only slated to get worse. And my sincere hope is that Miranda will be able to share her story here today, because it is incredibly important and unfortunately not unique for folks who have been living here and providing for their families and being a part of their neighborhoods and communities and are being displaced. So again, thank you. I would support this project being in my neighborhood, as I think all of our neighbors should have a place to be sheltered and to build their lives. And I hope that you're able to find the appropriate site. Thank you.
Thank you. And Miranda, let's try again.
Hello.
Oh, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have feedback? Yes.
We are getting feedback, yes.
Let me try to mute this. Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Okay, I apologize. I'm driving today and I'm in the middle of Spokane, just sitting in my bus. So I thank you for taking my call, and I have contacted every person, my my district or my ward folks, you, Mr. Engen, the county commissioner, and I'm wondering how come the health department, for my situation, had an impact in causing me homelessness, which I would think would be the opposite of what their mission statement would be. And, you know, I know that's a difficult situation. Nobody wants to talk about it, but I'm homeless. So I'm talking about it.
Anything
And
else, Miranda?
the other thing is what have you done as far as preventing? I know that you have reached out to property managers and requested that they keep people sheltered as long as possible if they were affected by COVID and that sort of thing. But it seems that like come July 1st, numerous people were made homeless and through no fault of their own. And we, many of us have been Native Montanans forever, but we're being displaced and gentrification is real. So I think that sometimes our wanting tax revenue trumps the real world impact to the workers and the people on the ground here in Montanans, basically.
Well, we appreciate your comments. I have no more hands raised, so why don't we get to those questions really quickly, and then I do see another hand that just came up. First, Adrian, our estimates with regard to growing numbers of unsheltered folks.
Yeah, so to answer that question, we don't have a magic ball that is or a rubric necessarily. What I'm talking about, ability to address what we're currently experiencing and what we may experience in the future, is that when we think about these plans and when we think about these options on a continuum, we need to think about them in a way that is flexible and scalable, so that and possibly even replicate in some other location, because we don't know what's coming. And even trying to get an accurate count of what we should be planning for to create some planning assumptions around how big these sites should be has posed a significant challenge for us. We worked with the homeless outreach team to do some micro point in time counts. We had them do it 3 times over the course of the month, and the numbers were kind of different every time. And so it's a challenging population to get a handle on and to make assumptions for what the number actually is.
Thank you. And then Ms. Merritt's question with regard to the distinction between the first and third group we're working to serve.
So the utilization of the Sleepy Inn as both a minimal isolation facility as well as temporary transitional housing, I think the distinction would be that the individuals that would be referred to the Sleepy Inn site would have a housing voucher, would be connected to case management, would have gone through the navigation services that exist today. They just don't have a place to go today because there's no rentals available. And so as the rental market changes, as the housing market changes, that site and that population may not need to be served out of that location.
Thank you. And then the third group then is service intensive.
Yes, so the third group, sorry, I forgot that there was a 2-part question. So the third group would be very similar to what we see at the temporary safe outdoor space. Individuals who are ready to kind of enter into that case management and begin navigating and a path towards permanent housing, but really aren't there yet, and would really benefit from that service-rich environment where they can be connected to case management, they can be in a very stable situation to help them make that progression forward.
Great, thank you. I'll take the eviction prevention question. So today we don't have data with regard to substantial increases in evictions, and certainly I'm not hearing that in my office today. But I want folks on the webinar today to be aware that that the state of Montana has designated 2 partners in the city of Missoula and Missoula County to serve as touch points and places to get help for folks facing eviction because they can't pay rent. The state has considerable money available for prevention of eviction. And those 2 organizations are the Human Resource Council here in Missoula and the Missoula Food Bank. So if you are experiencing challenges with paying the rent, those are the 2 touch points, the places to start. And they can help guide you through that system to get the help that you need. Back to participants, I have Leticia Romero.
Hi, my name is Leticia Romero. I live in Ward 4. Thank you so much for hosting this public meeting and the intentions to find a safe place for community members that are houseless and will be houseless. Yes, I guess all I just wanted to say was, you know, as you move forward and along, if there's any kind of resistance to put housing in areas where typically, you know, because like all I see is it's mostly concentrated like on certain neighborhoods, north side, but there's also the Lewis and Clark neighborhood and other kinds of neighborhoods in Missoula that can also, you know, help out in this, in finding a site. And so basically, like our community member, Josh Decker, was speaking about, we can share this, and I would want to help out also in my neighborhood. And like I said, Lewis and Clark neighborhood is very, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Slotnick.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add something to the answer on Councilwoman Merritt's question. In all 3 sites, I'm imagining, and I'm doing this just riffing right now, a rule governed situation. So that we're meeting people where they are at these different sites, but no site is wide open. All of these sites are safe, secure, rule governed, and clean, which is we are endeavoring here to make order out of chaos. So anyone who would be near any one of these sites should have that as the expectation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Quick note with regard to rental assistance as well. We will be having a community conversation on rental assistance and eviction at the City Council's Committee of the Whole meeting on August 4th. That will be the time and information you need to access that meeting will be available on the city's website, and we'll do some outreach as well about that. The Department of Commerce will be at that meeting to report on resources and how to best access them. And thank you, Aaron Pahan just sent that information along, and I think that could be helpful for a lot of folks. Back to our participants. I have Mackenzie. Mackenzie? And Mackenzie. right, I'm going to lower your hand and we'll ask you to come back if you can. And P. Kent, Montana.
Hi, can you actually hear me?
We can, and it's the P. Kent, Montana I thought it might be.
Indeed, it is the voice. I want to say you guys have done a great job. I love the fact that you're understanding we have multiple situations and have multiple needs. Back in looking when you discussed what has led us to this place, part of that equation, I think, comes from the VRBO Airbnb piece that has taken a lot of typical rentals out of the supply. And I would just encourage the city and county to look at that as every city and county needs to do now, and see what can be done, what can't be done, and try to wrestle with that as well. But I particularly want to applaud the looking at a campground and a permanent campground. The work that the Human Resource Council has been doing in Ravalli County has done a long survey over 2 summers of who's camping where, and we have a lot of working people living in their campers. And a permanent campground is going to help create a safe and sanitary place that's transitional, but at least you know that it is safe and it is hooked up to sewer and water and electricity. So, and I think the site selection, you've done a terrific job. It's a tough nut to crack, and thank you all for all your good work.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. Sure appreciate it. And Mr. Decker, I think this is you again, maybe?
Yes, sir. Just additionally, on a different branch of the topics that we discussed, you mentioned, Adrian had mentioned the Sleepy Inn site, and I think it's important that we look at private property that is mission aligned in ownership. Currently, the St. Patrick's Hospital owns the site of the Mountain Valley Inn on the corner of Orange Street and Broadway. And that is a hotel that is sitting empty right now. And I think the argument could be made, and probably, factually backed up, that St. Patrick's Hospital would save money by housing frequent flyers to its emergency room in the Mountain Valley Inn, and reduce its costs as a result of that. Reduce costs to providing medical care and help stem the gap on this problem that we're all working on to try and to ameliorate. So I would encourage Adrian to look at private property that is mission aligned, I guess.
And thank you, Mr. Decker. So for the good of the order, want folks to know that I and some staff members have had what I thought was a very productive initial conversation with the Director of Supportive Housing for the Providence System. And they're doing some really interesting and good work in communities throughout the Providence System. And we hope to continue those conversations. They're both owners and operators of supportive housing, and I think we have some opportunities to work together. So I appreciate that comment. Was not aware that Mountain Valley was currently in Providence's ownership, so that's certainly worth a conversation. Mackenzie, let's try again.
Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Perfect. My computer always turns off my microphone setting. I want to thank you guys for doing this presentation. And also, my understanding was that this is to close the Reserve Street illegal encampment. And I'm just wondering what kind of incentivization or what reason do you guys have to believe that people will actually leave those encampments and go to these sanctioned areas, because from what the public knows, there's a lot of drug use down there, and illegal activity, and as evident by the needles that are found down there. So I'm just wondering, how will those people fit into the equation, and what kind of rules will there be, or rules will there not be, to incentivize people to go live in these legal spaces?
Thanks for the question, and I think both Commissioner Slotnick and I are happy to take that. And I talk too much, so I'll let Josh have at it.
Thanks a lot, Mayor, and thanks, Mackenzie, for asking that question. It's a really good question. Our hope here is to provide people with alternatives, offer them an alternative place to live that is legal, safe, secure, and then let them know they can no longer camp illegally where they are. If people make the choice not to avail themselves of our alternatives, but to go elsewhere, that's fine. But once we've made this option available, we will enforce trespassing where trespassing is happening. So the incentive here would be, if you don't leave an area where it's illegal to camp, you will be in violation of a law. So now there's a lot of gray here and a lot to be worked out, but the idea here is to create places for people to live and then enforce trespassing where trespassing is happening. We aren't going to arrest people or kick people out of anywhere unless we actually have some place for folks to go. So we're in the process here of creating alternatives and then enforcing the law.
And Commissioner Slotnick took the words out of my mouth. So that's exactly what our intention is here. We certainly have law enforcement on board as well. We have a good bit of time remaining, and we don't have a long queue of folks who wish to speak. So I'm letting folks go twice. And Ms. Peltier. And Miranda, you're muted. And it's still muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can. We've got that echo again.
Got that echo. Yep, there. Is that better? Okay.
It is.
So, I think that we are taking the humanness out of this whole conversation by our algorithms and our forecasting and all of this, and nobody will address my question as far as the Missoula County Health Department essentially made me homeless because they said I let my ex stay in a camper for whatever. I don't know. No ordinance was cited. I wasn't given what I violated. I was told to immediately move the camper. I don't know to this day what I violated, but I moved the camper. I am homeless. And this is one of the most impactful things in my entire life. So what are you going to do in the future as far as notifying the tenants of a place about a violation or said ordinance violation, instead of automatically calling a landlord over and over and essentially getting somebody evicted? Why can't a tenant be offered some opportunity to remediate a problem? If they didn't know a problem existed in the first place, then they are made aware of that said problem. Okay. I don't understand how I can't get a simple question answered.
Ms. Peltier, I'm familiar with your case because you did indeed contact my office. And our conversation with the health department had everything to do with your landlord and the situation on your landlord's property. I'd be happy to have a representative from the health department have a conversation with you about how we got there. And also, I can tell you that the health department is very interested right now in assisting us in solving for this problem. Being unhoused is a public health issue. And we know that we have, I think, considerable opportunity for enhanced collaboration and work with the health department. And frankly, I think there's opportunity for the health department to be leaders in this arena as we move forward, because we're going to need help and capacity. But I've made a note here, and we have your contact information. I'll make sure that someone from the health department has a conversation with you. And Mackenzie.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up. I think like half my question got answered. Maybe I didn't phrase it very clearly. I just wanted to know a bit more about what sort of expectations will be for the people who are leaving the Reserve Street. Maybe, I know this is not the whole population. Sorry, my baby. The whole population, there are a lot of people who just need a hand up, and that's great that they're going to get those services. But maybe the people who are using drugs more, is that going to be allowed at some of these locations, that will drug use and that sort of activity be, allowed to continue like it is at the illegal encampment?
Commissioner Slotnick.
So thanks, Mackenzie, for that. And all of these sites will have sets of rules. We haven't determined exactly what it is, but I feel confident in saying at no site will we be tolerating illegal activity. Will that work?
I think that's succinct, Commissioner.
Okay, thanks.
So I don't have any additional hands up in the participant box. And I suspect that some folks would like to digest some of this information, as would we, and as we will. I note Commissioner Strohmeyer has a thought.
Thank you, Mayor Engen. Yeah, just to follow up on Commissioner Slotnick's comments a moment ago. Right now, there is no incentive for folks to move. And what we are providing, what we intend to provide, is an array of options that will provide safe, sanitary, and context in which expectations of following the law will be put forward. If folks do not want to comply with that, then they will not be able to live in those locations so identified, and nor will they be able to live in some of the current situations that we're trying to mitigate and discourage folks from camping in. So again, I really appreciate the methodical work that the incident management team and Adrian's folks have conducted here. I will also say that in terms of other options, I really appreciate folks noting that are there other sites in town that maybe we missed, and this is the opportunity over the next couple of weeks or so, if folks know of a very specific location, and I'm not talking just in generalities as far as a neighborhood in town, but if you know of a parcel of land that you think would fit into the criteria that we've established as far as being a safe, secure, sanitary location to address the needs in our community of those who are unhoused, let us know. That's why we were doing what we are doing today and soliciting input over the next few weeks. So thank you.
Hey, thanks, Commissioner. And we are fortunate in the webinar environment to be able to make corrections in real time. I just received information that Providence does not own the Mountain Valley Inn. A private individual who happens to work at Providence does own it, but Providence does not. So just clarifying that for the record. And in the participants, I have Sheila.
Thanks, Mayor Engen. I do have one quick question. There seems to be a common thread of people asking, what are you going to do if people don't want to move to these sites? What do you do if people don't want to follow the rules of these sites? And what I'm wondering, you've reiterated both from the city and county side that people will not be allowed to camp illegally, will not be allowed to break laws while they're camping on these sites, or if they're allowed to camp on these sites. But does the city and the county have the appetite for rounding people up who are homeless?
I think I'll suggest, Sheila, that it's less about an appetite for rounding anyone up and more for simply enforcing laws. We're a society of laws, and what we're providing are alternatives. And if those alternatives don't work for some individuals, I think their already difficult lives will simply be made more difficult because they're not going to be able to camp where it's illegal, and they're not going to be allowed to engage in illegal activity without consequences.
I appreciate that, John, but there are already every morning when I drop the kids off at camp, and camps are being held at the parks all over Missoula, there are people who are sleeping in the city parks. Just about any open, somewhat nice developed space that isn't private land there. And some private lands, there are people sleeping there. So the question is, do you add incarceration to the difficulties of those people's lives if they don't want to go to your sites?
Without the alternative in place, Sheila, we've really had limited experience in practice. So I think once we have alternatives in place, we'll use our best discretion. But if you can't camp in a park, we're not going to allow you to camp in a park. We'll be patrolling those areas where it's illegal to camp. And we'll certainly be responding to complaints. So our hope is that the alternative will discourage that behavior. And if that doesn't do it, I think we are in a position where we're going to be a bit more aggressive in enforcing our rules for all the reasons that we've heard over the course of the last couple of years and before that.
Mayor, could I add something?
Certainly.
Please.
Thanks. So Sheila, thanks for your comments. And I want to use a phrase I first learned from Commissioner Barrow, a compassionate enforcement. And we're going to go big on both compassion and enforcement, and not give too much ground on either spot. Also, it's really worth knowing we're talking about folks who have been traumatized just by the act of being homeless, and were most likely endured some type of trauma before they were homeless, and that was one of the contributing factors in making them so they are unhoused. We're talking about a population where 70 to 80% are suffering from mental illness, 70 to 80% are suffering from addiction. So just saying to somebody, you have to live in this house, go, is not enough, which is why we're going to be providing certain sets of services depending on the spot where the person is living. And we will have expectations that are commensurate with the level of service. And also knowing that it isn't always going to work.
And I guess that's the intersection that I'm trying to draw you to, is when it doesn't work, are you prepared to incarcerate people for being homeless?
Well, that's where we hit the criminal justice system, right? Yeah. And a lot of that's going to have to do with the rules on the books and judges in the court system, and we'll be I like the term of art that Juanita suggests, but there's some behavior we're just not going to be able to tolerate, and there will be consequences to that. I don't think incarceration is going to fix anybody, So my hope is that, and none of this is happening in a vacuum, right? So we're also continuing our conversations with both municipal justice court and district court with regard to alternative programs. So it makes little sense to find someone who doesn't have any money to pay a fine. It makes little sense to incarcerate someone who is suffering from behavioral health problems, addiction, etc., because we're not getting to the root of it. This stuff is ugly, and frankly, we're going to get it wrong sometimes. I wish I could suggest that there are perfect solutions here, but there are not. So we're gonna take it a step at a time. A little bit of this is uncharted territory. Frankly, a lot of it is uncharted territory for us. But I think there are enough talented, thoughtful folks pulling in the same direction, particularly within the criminal justice system, to try to get out of the business of throwing somebody in the pokey when the pokey ain't going to fix them and is likely going to make them worse.
And Mayor, this time you took the words out of my mouth. Well said. The mistake to be made here is that there is only living in art housing or incarceration. And that incarceration, as the mayor is saying, is not the answer here. It's mandating, which means the force of law, a certain type of treatment that would allow people to live successfully in a sanctioned space. And we have to figure that out, but we're going into this eyes wide open.
Best wishes to all of you.
Thank you. Andy? Sorry, Andy?
Thank you. I'm going to just take a deep breath for a second. There are often more of these comments, so I should appreciate that today there have been so few. But I really appreciate Mr. Mayor and Commissioner Slotnick, the work that you both just did in responding with some compassion and empathy and understanding that there are some generalizations being made about what unhoused folks are dealing with and who comprises our unhoused population here in Missoula and across the country. There are a number of things that just as community members you can do to address concerns you might have about things like someone mentioned needles and illegal drug use. I, for example, have built and installed a sharps container on the back of my shed in my alley because I'm far more concerned that I'm going to one day walk back there to take the trash out or empty the compost and find someone who has overdosed than I am that there might be sharps laying in the alley. So, there are Narcan trainings that you can take. You can get a prescription for Narcan that you can then dispense should you come upon someone who is having an overdose. These are ways that we can, as community members, be accountable to one another and be supportive of one another. Throwing someone in jail because they're not moving or because they continue to use drugs is unequivocally not the solution. In addition, people are sleeping in public parks because we have a problem with housing in this community that we are trying to address. But there are a lot of steps way, way, way back in terms of ensuring that people remain housed, that they get the mental health services and addiction services that they need that prevent people from living in parks. So a lot of times folks call in and comment about, how inconvenient that is for them, or, various ways of saying that it's an eyesore to them, throw around the word safety in that capacity. And I think it's really, really important that we look to our inside at ourselves and think about what that's about for us, rather than trying to find a way to disappear those problems, because incarcerating people doesn't disappear problems, it disappears people. And that's not the solution. I appreciate very much the comments that you, Mayor Engen and Commissioner Slotnick both made to that effect. And I hope that we can continue to try to provide more education and understanding to the rest of our community about what people might be facing and why what they're seeing is what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashley.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Fantastic. First of all, thank you so much for all of the work that you guys have done to provide alternatives, which is very difficult to remove somebody from a camp that has literally nowhere to go. So I appreciate and applaud your efforts, and to Adrienne Beck and her team for doing that as well. I do have a question. Commissioner Slotnick, you had mentioned that it would be rule governed. Of course, we know that these camps are safe, that they are sanctioned. Who will be governing them, I guess? Who will be operating them? Are they city county operated and managed, or is it contracted to an outside organization to operate and manage it? What does that look like?
You know, we haven't gotten all the way down that path. I think what I know, speaking on behalf of the city, is that operating these facilities isn't in our wheelhouse. It's not among what the MBAs would call our core competence. So what we would hope is that we could, through a proposal process, find a provider or providers who are willing to take this on a contract basis and apply expertise. We've been really fortunate, I think, to have the team at United Way and our homeless outreach team and our friends at the Poverello Center and others who provide expertise in this arena and have made good progress in what I think is the successful experiment that's been the temporary safe outdoor space. So I think our intention today is that we look for providers who have this experience, and if that doesn't work, plan B, as always, is we figure out how to make something like this happen in-house. But I think our preference would be to rely on that expertise outside. Commissioner?
All I want to do is add Hope Rescue Mission to that list. They've done yeoman's work out there.
Thank you. Yes, and I apologize for that oversight. You're absolutely.
We remembered the other 6, so good job. It's a long list.
And Sam Duncan.
Hey there, my name's Sam Duncan, pronouns they, them, and I'm a community organizer with North Missoula Community Development Corporation. I'm also a resident of the North Side. Of course, I appreciate all the work that y'all are doing to try to do our best as a community to support our unhoused neighbors and community members. As a North Sider, however, I'm aware that there's already slated to be 583 units of housing put in that North Scott area between North Scott and Reserve. And I really would encourage y'all to get neighborhood feedback and neighbor feedback on the impacts this will have on a community that already doesn't have resources. We don't have a grocery store on the North Side. We don't have public restrooms. We don't have a lot of things for ourselves already. And so with the White Pine development, the Villaggio, and everything else that's being put on this one corner of our neighborhood, I would just really encourage y'all, because, you know, we as neighbors, we want to be engaged and know what's going on. Otherwise, it feels like decisions are being made without our consent. And it's a lot of pressure for one neighborhood to carry. So I hope that y'all will do that work to reach out to neighbors. I'm here to help make that happen. And also think about other neighborhoods that don't have such high density, have so many existing pressures, and potentially how they can help support a community effort to house all of our neighbors. Thanks.
Thank you. Want to make sure that any members of the press who are interested in asking questions have that opportunity. We've got 5 minutes left, but we can hang in a little longer as necessary. I don't see any hands up. We have no further hands up in our participants window. Really appreciate folks showing up virtually for this webinar and for the presentation. Again, commissioners and I and staff will be reviewing report and considering the options before us and working collaboratively with the community. We again won't be making these decisions in a vacuum, and certainly we'll do outreach to neighbors with regard to whatever decisions we settle on, and do our best to mitigate impacts and unintended consequences. But appreciate the tone and tenor of the conversation today. Commissioners, anything you'd like to add or subtract?
No, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Just thanks for everybody for coming, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for running a good meeting.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah. And likewise, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think as you started, you noted that doing nothing is not an option, and today's conversation and the conversations that will continue in the days to come are in the spirit of doing something different and expecting different results rather than doing the same thing and expecting different results. So thank you.
Thank
Well
you.
said.
Well, thank you, commissioners. Thank you again, Adrian. Thanks to all of the staff who's been assisting Adrian in this, all of the staff who helps guide us every day, including the folks who managed to get the technology to work today. Zoe and team, we appreciate it. All of our communications team and admin staff, grateful to all of you. We will forge ahead. Thank you again for your time today. And I always say we'll be adjourned, but we're not in that environment. So I will just say farewell. Thank you. Keep cool, and we will forge ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.